Hey everyone, Ripley Sellers with Bob's Watches. I'm here with Justin in the studio for another episode of Vintage of the Week, where we pull aside one remarkable vintage watch and share it with you. And remember, all of these are available for purchase, so if you like what we're talking about, go on head over to the site and pick it up and add it to your collection.
All right, Ripley, we got a great watch today, but before we get into it, should we do a wrist check? Let's see what you got.
Well, vintage, so I'm wearing vintage, my old Air King, reference
nice.
5500. Had this one since you could pick them up for less than $1,000, and never regretted owning it.
Classic.
What about you today?
I'm going something a little different, a little fun. The Tudor Heritage Chronograph.
Vintage inspired.
Yes, vintage inspired. Great watch. You know me, I love something fun
Really
and different.
underrated, really underrated.
I agree. I think it doesn't get a lot of attention, and you don't see it a lot. You don't even really know it exists, but it's a cool watch, and there's a lot to talk about, and I think it deserves more attention.
Yeah, it came out really one of the first vintage revivals after Tudor's global relaunch, and I feel like people just sort of started sleeping on it when the black base started coming out, but yeah, good looks, and I like the black dial a lot.
I like the black dial too. Honestly, I like both of them. I think the blue's a really sharp look.
And they also have the gray, which is sort of that, but slightly lighter.
Exactly, but black's classic. I like the orange and white combo too. Can't go wrong. It's
Great
nice.
choice.
Yeah.
You want to get into it?
Yeah, let's get right into it. We got a really cool watch to start out. Vintage Rolex from circa 1958.
Yeah. So I mean, when we're talking about vintage Rolex, so often it's always the sports models, the presidents, whatever.
Yes.
But there's a lot of interesting, really kind of almost weird models they did before everything became super streamlined. And this reference 9083, nicknamed the UFO, is one of them.
I love these. This is right up my alley. I love those vintage watches that, like you said, you don't really see a whole lot of them. They kind of get overlooked. Everyone loves the Submariners and the Daytonas and all the sport models. But there's some really cool old watches that you don't really even know exist, and they have some great features. They're just beautiful, and this is a great example of it. I love seeing stuff like this come across.
And they are more rare too than the Daytona is a grail. Vintage Daytona, it's like it's kind of a blue chip investment as far as your vintage Rolexes. But as far as the numbers in production, far more of those than what you get right here.
Yes.
And this checks a bunch of boxes for things you just simply don't see anymore.
Right.
I mean, right off the bat, integrated bracelet.
Yes, how many Rolex integrated bracelets you could easily count them.
No, and I think the most interesting thing about this one is it looks just like a regular standard Oyster bracelet. You know, it's not like the Midas or something like that.
Right.
It's, for all intents and purposes, if you look at it from the clasp side, that's, pretty much looks like your Oyster, and you flip it around and there's no lugs. It just kind of meets with the case, and then you look at the watch itself, and that's all very different.
Yeah, it's essentially just an Oyster bracelet that's integrated. A lot of times, like you mentioned, the King Midas, you see an integrated bracelet, and the whole bracelet is designed and built around being that integrated feature. And this one's not. It's kind of cool, and it's really different.
Yeah, really different. And although it's got an Oyster case, an Oyster bracelet, it doesn't have an Oyster case. So it's got a snap-on case back and this tiny little push-pull crown here, which is recessed into the side of the case. And this is what gives it its UFO nickname. It's round, circular. There's kind of no lugs protruding from it. Even the crown itself is sort of recessed in there.
Yeah, very smooth.
Yeah, when you look at it from the side, you can kind of see how
the profile really
started.
shows that kind of UFO look to it.
Yeah, and again, no screw-down crown, no screw-down case back. And speaking of the case back, this example is in fantastic condition. You can see these really, you can see the Rolex coronet right there, serial number engraving here, and these aren't really, really deep. These aren't like big embossed things. So often these are just worn away over the years, but clearly this one, look how tight that bracelet is.
And I was going to say another thing to mention, especially since we're talking about this exact watch, because this is the one, it's going for sale on the site, someone can actually buy this watch, is the condition of that rivet bracelet.
Well, the condition of the whole thing, I mean, this is one of those watches where those little angles on the case, over polish it, it loses that.
Right.
You kind of want that perfectly symmetrical, kind of rounded with the sharp angles.
Yes.
And it's all there, beautiful patina on the dial. Yeah. It looks aged, but it doesn't look like stained or scratched or like something got in there and ruined it.
Yeah, it's got that waffle texture on the dial. I love these dials. These are probably my favorite vintage dial. I see them on the Milgauss as well, and every time I see one, I'm just enamored by it. Part of the reason you don't see them all the time, like you said, it's something that's a little under the radar, which I kind of like. I kind of feel special that way. It's not another 5512 or 1675, and I just think that texture on the dial is so subtle. It's beautiful. It has that distinct vintage look, and it's a great look. And there's no lume plots on it either, right?
Yeah,
so
no lume on the hands or
dial
dial
anywhere.
You know, it's definitely a more dressy design. The fact that nothing screws down on it, and keep in mind they were making a lot of things with screw down cases by '58 here. So you know, it's a decision to make it more of a dressy model. And you know, in that same vein, you don't lume's kind of more of a tool utilitarian kind of feature. So there's no lume to worry about. You get these really nice polished hands, clean dial. Don't have to worry about any degradation or anything like that. And I mean, just such an unusual Rolex.
Yeah,
when you think about Rolex today, you've got, you know, nothing comes on an integrated bracelet, although it's very much part of the watch. But you know, everything's got lume, even like the date justs. Screw down crown, screw down case back, chronometer rated movement. This is none of that.
Yeah.
You know, if you notice, there's no COSC text or anything like that. Just says precision, simple hand wind movement, push pull crown, snap on back, acrylic crystal.
The hands.
Yeah, I mean, none of this is like modern Rolex.
Right.
Other than the Oyster bracelet, it's, you know, it could be almost a totally different watch, except the little coronet at 12
And I
o'clock.
love that about it. And also, part of that package is these are a really great price, relatively, right?
Oh my God,
I mean, we talk about vintage Rolex. You could easily spend a pretty much infinite amount of money. And
17.8 million is currently the
exactly.
running total.
And even just, you know, I say basic, but like a basic vintage Submariner is nowhere near the inexpensive side of the range.
No, I mean, you're starting out at 5 figures and just simply going up from there into, you know, house prices.
And these, and like you said, even though these are actually a lot more rare than a lot of those watches, they just don't really get the same attention. So,
and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact they don't exist. You know, the Submariners existed perpetually since it was launched in '53. Yeah. There's a lot of marketing behind it. We've been seeing it in, you know, on the wrist of James Bond. This is a fleeting moment in Rolex's history. There's no contemporary equivalent, and so just like you were saying, it's, you know, it's not like anything. It doesn't exist. People are sleeping on it, and it's because if you want its modern version, it doesn't exist.
Right. And because of that, it's relative great value.
Great value.
And you know me, I love a value. So to me, this one ticks a lot of boxes. You know, the value of it, just the uniqueness, the history, you know, all the features like the integrated bracelet that you don't see. And I just think it's a really, really nice vintage watch that a lot of people probably don't see or recognize.
Yeah, a lot of bang for your buck and so many talking points. You roll up to the watch meetup with this. People have Air Kings, people have Subs, people have Daytonas. This, it's just so non-Rolex that even for Rolex fans, it's even almost more interesting.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. You say you're wearing a vintage Rolex, and no one is picturing this, even though it's exactly what it is, right?
Yeah, and manual wind movement, you know, another thing they don't do anymore.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I think it's a great watch. I think it just deserves more attention.
It does.
Has a fun nickname as well. Everyone loves to watch it. The nickname, the UFO, is great. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of those models that people start wising up to in the future.
Yeah.
You know, kind of the word's out on vintage Rolex sports models. The day-date's been heating up for a number of years, and people are kind of finding those overlooked pockets where it's a lot of value for money. It's something truly unique. And this is checking all the boxes, but it doesn't have that, you know, it hasn't had that moment where it goes from attainable to, you know, basically stratospheric.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a great one. And like we said earlier, these watches are all watches that we're actually selling. This is something a little different for this series, where we're bringing watches that people can actually buy and add to their collection, which is really nice. So if you like the watch, if you wanted to add it to your collection, it will actually be for sale as this video is going live. So I don't know when you're watching it, but when the video goes live, the watch goes for sale. So feel free to head to the site and take a look.
Yeah, and also let us know in the comments what you think about this, you know, the Rolex UFO. Do you like the integrated bracelet? Do you like a Rolex that doesn't look like a Rolex? You know,
these kind of off, you know, these vintage watches that aren't really the spotlight ones, all the sport models. Like, let us know what you guys think about them. Would you like to see more of these? Personally, I really like them. I think they're, you know, they're really cool and really interesting. So let us know what you guys think. Are they winners, or do you like the sport models better and the Daytonas and, you know, all the heavy hitters?
Yeah, and would you like to see Rolex make a modern version of this one?
That would be interesting.
That would be a really cool one, but that's probably more in Tudor's territory.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, thanks for joining us for Vintage of the Week. Tune in next time, and again, remember, if you like this one, go head on over to the site and add it to your collection.